Today's episode of Literally is sponsored by Lowe's. Welcome to the pod. How are you?
It's a pleasure to meet you, man. I'm a big fan and deepest respect and admiration for your career. So it's great to meet you. Thank you for having me.
I feel the same. I have to say that my greatest moment, I really do believe my greatest comedy moment, other than being probably an 8-year-old kid and seeing Blazing Saddles, was seeing Borat.
Thank you.
It is.
Blazing Saddles was also a big movie for me as well. By the way, that was a seminal movie to experience. Very groundbreaking.
Well, that's the thing. It's just that notion of being in a theater and feeling, I can't believe what I'm seeing, is so impossible to capture. I mean, it's so rare.
And it's getting more rare. I mean, the idea of going into a movie theater and having a large mass of people all collectively responding to something without people getting offended, without things breaking down, just getting movies into movie theaters has become a much more rare experience, unfortunately.
How much of Borat was, I know you get asked this all the time, and I think I know the answer, but how much of it was scripted, or was it, we're going to go into this place and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but you don't know what's happening until Sasha's interacting with the people in the rodeo or wherever it is?
Sasha had questions. I mean, there was a script of sorts, it wasn't a traditional script, and it was pretty thick actually, because it was filled with yes, and it was filled with the questions that he would want to be asking of these various targets. And then, of course, you couldn't script what that person was going to respond. And then things would start to unravel and you couldn't script that. So there's like a third of it would be script, and the rest of it would be Sasha having to improvise based on what the target was saying. And yet we knew where we wanted to go, because it was also, amazingly enough, a story about him wanting to find Pam Anderson in California. So he had to be able to manipulate the conversation to get somebody to help him with a clue to get to the next point in the story also. And if that didn't work, we had to do that scene all over again with a new group of people, sometimes in a different state, depending on how it ended, So it was a very complicated process.
And the releases, how did you handle getting the releases of the people the regular people on camera who didn't come off so great, potentially, has America laughing at them, and they still signed the release?
Well,
how did that happen?
It was always done, or as often as possible, it was done prior to the scene, under a kind of a ruse, honestly. They didn't realize who Borat was. We would say, he's from Kazakhstan. He doesn't really know English. He doesn't know American mores or customs. This is for Kazakhstani television. And people, one of the keys to the success of Borat is ego and vanity. Everybody has a lot of ego and vanity. And when you say, hey, saying it to you is one thing, but saying it to average people in the country, they are very flattered very easily, and they love talking about themselves. People are just like that. And so when you would go, wow, you would be great on TV. Have you ever thought about doing TV? Oh, no. And then you go, wow, well, we have this Kazakhstani journalist who would love to talk to you, and oh, yeah, sure, and you have to kind of be patient with him, because he doesn't really speak English. He doesn't even know what a chair is. And people would believe all of that, and they would sign the releases very, very happily, and then be extremely bitter at the end of the scene.
I love hearing that pitch of introducing Borat to some unsuspecting rube.
That's how it works.
He doesn't even know what a chair is. I mean, you're just going to have to really just tolerate it if you can.
Yes. And with Borat, the thing was that with Borat, it really worked, because even though he was a rapist and an anti-Semite and a misogynist and, all those things, there was a certain innocence to him, and people gave him a lot of slack. And and that allowed the scenes to unravel in these very, very funny ways. When we did Bruno, because he was a flamboyantly gay character. People were almost immediately hostile to him. And it was really much harder to get people to that same place because they were immediately ready to like reject him or even get violent with him, get physically violent with him. And so the response was very, very different between Borat and Bruno.
And it had nothing to do with that Sacha's now more famous. The people didn't realize that Bruno was Sacha. It hadn't gotten to that point yet.
Nobody ever recognized it. We went out on Melrose when we were going to do Bruno. We took, our phone cameras and just went out on Melrose with him dressed like in a cheap CVS wig or something, a chemo wig, and just had him, kind of sashay down the street, like Divine and Pink Flamingos, just to see how people would respond to it. No one recognized him, even on Melrose Avenue. So we thought, wow, it's amazing. People they don't observe that carefully. You learn a lot about the human psychology when you do movies like this. You realize people are not looking that carefully at things. That's why eyewitnesses have to be questioned, because what they're seeing is not necessarily what happened. And so they didn't recognize him, and we felt like, wow, we could actually get away with this again.
I knew the minute the sort of Kazakhstani came up in the theater, I knew this was going to be one of the great film going experiences. I think it's definitely in my top. Oh, listen, it's in my top 5 comedies ever made, and might be in my top 20 movies of all time. Easy.
Wow.
For sure. It's unbelievable.
Thank you. Well, you pointed out. I was going to say, you pointed out a very interesting fact about the movie, which is that opening. It's the icebreaker. Like when a stand-up comes out and he wants to get that first laugh, having that logo of the Kazakhstani television, that broke the audience up right off the bat, and they were like strapped in and ready to take the ride. And that really like loosened the audience up, and it really wound up being like a great opening to the movie.
Did the famous horse falling down with the flag is just a happy in the rodeo? That's just a happy accident. You had one of your camera guys on it, correct?
Well, I'll tell you the truth about that. Initially Todd Phillips was he was the original director of the movie, and he and Sacha did not get along. And after like a week or so, he left the project, and we couldn't really use most of what they had shot. But they did shoot that scene. And so Todd Phillips actually directed that scene. And that was a happenstance moment. And that's the reason why I wanted to keep it when we started over again, because I thought the chances of doing that rodeo scene and having the horse fall down in the background, it's never going to happen again. So we used that one scene from Todd, and I'm very grateful to him for that.
Now that image is one of those things where you go, that is the happy accidents in filmmaking or in any time that's the goal. Do you have a favorite sequence in Borat? Do you have one is particularly dear to your heart?
Well, there are so many. I mean, the original assembly was like 6 hours long, and there was
Please release it. Please release it. Please.
I wish somebody would. I really do. I don't have any control over it, unfortunately. But so there were scenes like a Borat getting healed in a church where he came in, and it was one of these evangelistic churches where people are speaking in tongues and rolling on the floor, and they heal him. He comes in, he's looking for Jesus, and they take him in, and they were very sweet to him, actually. But it's an amazing, crazy, like beyond comedy kind of scene. And they heal him. And at the end, even he said to me, Sacha said, I don't know, I did feel something, So that was an amazing scene. But I also love like just the kind of slapstick, silliness. Like we went to an antique store in Mississippi, and he goes through almost like a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin kind of destruction of the store, where he slips on something and breaks this thing, and that causes this to break. I mean, I love the construction and the choreography of stuff like that also. So I was constantly personally amazed as I was watching, as I was directing, and seeing these things kind of unfold. It was kind of miraculous.
He's a genius. He just is he's an absolute genius. People also don't realize how tall he is. He's a giant.
Right. Yeah, you would think that's why we thought with Bruno that, oh, now he's done Borat. Now here's this weird looking guy walking down the street. Aren't people going to realize who this is? But they still didn't. Yes, he towers over everybody.
You started back in, was Fridays, which you wrote on in this. I remember Fridays, by the way. That was everybody was trying to be Saturday Night Live after Saturday Night Live.
Right.
I know. We'll make a show called Friday. No, how about Wednesdays? No, Fridays for sure.
Right. We hate the writers, as you could imagine, hated. We were brought in and told we were going to do a late night comedy show. We wanted it to be as far from Saturday Night Live as possible, and they asked us to come up with names, and we came up with these crazy Monty Python-esque names for the show. Not even words. Some of the suggestions weren't even words. We wanted it to be as distinctive as possible. And then one day we came into work, and the binders and the jackets, they were all said Fridays on them. So we never had a chance to really have our input, you know.
My favorite story about that is there was a great show on, of all places, on MTV. These amazing geniuses, and when I tell you the title, you'll know exactly what it is. But they had a title that they wanted. The network hated it, and so they came up with what they thought was the worst title ever, knowing it would be rejected. It wasn't rejected, and so there is a show called Wonder Chosen.
Sure, of course, I love that show.
Which is one of my all-time. By the way, I think Wonder Chosen and Borat are in the same. What genre would you even describe Borat and Wonder Chosen? Because they're not really improv. They're not even scripted improv, although obviously that's a huge part of it. I feel like it transcends being called that, but I don't know what I would call it.
I think, we do have a tendency to want to label things, but I do think that Borat defies labeling. I mean, it's called mockumentary, but like Spinal Tap to me is a mockumentary,
Yes.
Spinal Tap is like set up situations with actors. It's not really dealing with real people. It's not like an X Factor like there is in Borat. So it doesn't really fit into any category particularly, in my opinion.
Are we excited about the new Spinal Tap sequel? I'm very excited for this.
I am too. I mean, I remember when the first one came out, and it took a while for it. Like The Big Lebowski had the same issue. When it first came out, it did not have the excitement, and slowly people, which is great when this happens because it's rare, people found the movie, and kind of like owned the movie finally. The audience finally owned the movie in both those cases. And I'm not a big fan of sequels, generally speaking, but something like Spinal Tap does make me laugh just thinking about the sequel, which is a good sign, I think.
I saw a clip of the sequel, and I was like, oh, how is it going to be? And I knew it was going to be great when it's Michael McKean, and he's going, one time, we got lost backstage. It's very unfair. It was only once. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's the notion that they're bitter about it's funny how the same joke actually can work for an entire movie. Like the bit that they're bitter about being misrepresented, if that's all it is, that's plenty for me.
Yeah. Well, it resonates also. I mean, there's so many old rockers now, everybody, all these guys, how did they live? Don't trust anyone over 30, my generation, all these guys, Pete Townsend, Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, they're all out there, and so the idea that there is a group that's still out there, but bitter is hilarious, so I think it'll be funny.
I've heard, I'm kind of obsessed with bitter musicians talking about stuff. So the most recent one is I saw Daryl Hall being so angry that Hall & Oates was considered yacht rock.
Right. I saw that too. Well, even the fact that he's angry at Oates seems kind of silly to me, I don't know why.
I have a question for you. When because they're separately touring. If you're a fan, do you go, hey, I'm going to go to a concert. Who are you seeing? I'm going to see Hall tonight. or like, what are you going to say? Oh, I'm going to Oates. Like, what do you, Where do you draw the line? What camp do you go to, I wonder?
Do they advertise as Hall and nothing? Or, how do they? What does it
Hall
say
with an ampersand? Just nothing next
just
to
nothing
it.
on the side, a little blank or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's crazy.
I went on a tangent during talking about Fridays. Is it my imagination, or was the logo also really bad for Fridays?
And the whole thing, it was. I'm telling you, Rob, when we came, we were all young guys, and we really wanted to do something radical, and it had this really lame font, and it was called Fridays, and it was like, wow, now we have to kind of double our effort to be alienating to the audience, just to show that we're not trying to copy Saturday Night Live.
It could have been worse. It could have been, remember the Howard Cosell show?
I do remember it.
I think it might have been called Live on Saturday Night or something like that. It was
it might have been even Saturday Night Live. I'm not sure. It was something like that for sure. And I do remember it very well. Yeah. And I loved Howard Cosell, but thought, wow, that's a bad idea.
No. Cosell's not Lorne Michaels.
No, not at all. And not even a good host for that kind of thing.
Until I was doing a little bit of research on you, I didn't, for some reason, realize that you were early in Arsenio's show. And that there was, is it true that for 6 months you wrote jokes that didn't get on the air?
That is true. I mean, first of all, I was desperate for a job when, because I had come off Fridays, and I thought, oh, the world is my oyster. And then I couldn't get a job for like 7 years. And no one would hire me, and what I was being offered was terrible, and I was like, "Wow, this is it; it's over already." And then I got recommended to Arsenio, and went to see him, and he was cool, and I got hired. I told him I wanted to write like Richard Pryor type monologues for him, and he was really into that. And at first, he tried my material, and it didn't do that well, and he already was getting so much controversy just by being black, by being a black host on TV. He got so much hate mail, so much abuse from. It's before the internet, and I used to read his so-called fan mail, and it was violent, threatening. It was incredible, the racism and the violence of the racism, wanting to do things to him that were beyond my imagination. And also, like they used to say, written in crayon a lot of time, things like that, just scary. And we had to have metal screeners up at the audience so that people would come in, they would take weapons off the people when they came in to see the show. So he had a lot of pressure on him, and he just could not do controversial material and get away with it. So he started doing much safer material. I could not write it for whatever reason, and I just couldn't do it. And for 6 months, I continued to write material, but could not get a joke on the air. Knew my contract was about to end, and when it ended, I got let go.
That show was so big for that moment where it was so big. It was really, well, that's Bill Clinton's saxophone.
Bill Clinton's saxophone, yeah.
That was I mean, you could not argue, it's the truth. That was the beginning of politicians who used to be, presidential candidates used to be above even commenting on movies or sporting events. Like they were above it. They didn't deign to comment, much less participate in the popular culture. That was the first moment of it.
Bill Clinton was very savvy that way. And also, it's hard to imagine today, but Arsenio had music on that no one else would touch. He had guests on that no one else would touch. I mean, he would have Public Enemy or NWA. Those kind of bands were on, and there was an audience that was craving that, and he tapped into that. Because the other talk shows were not touching that kind of talent.
Arsenio and I used to hang out a lot together back in the 80s. We had a lot of, in my wild days, we had a lot of like Forum Club, Jerry Buss, Laker Girl, like, I remember he had I remember he had some apartment off of like Fountain Avenue, and it was too good. I haven't seen him in years, but I love that guy.
Yeah.
the absolute greatest.
He's a survivor also. He's around, yeah. He's doing stand-up, and he kind of made it through that period and kind of still standing, which is always something that I find admirable and so difficult in show business.
Yeah, making a mark and then like going to the next chapter that doesn't evolve that mark you've made it's very, very hard to do. Very few people do it. I'm not even sure how people do it, but they do. And then Seinfeld is obviously amazing because of all the amazing things to talk about that show. My favorite thing is it was what was the original order? 6 episodes? What was the original?
Well, there was
the
original, and then there was 4 episodes, and then 13. So over the course of like 3 or 4 years, there was one pilot that took a year for them to decide to do a few more shows. They did 4 more shows, another year before they finally picked it up for 13. And then after that, they got their first full pickup of like 22 shows.
I remember. And I remember driving my car and hearing someone, I don't think it was Jerry, must have been Larry, maybe it was you, on a local like KABC radio station promoting the show. I'd never heard of it. It had been on for like 6 episodes. And man, whoever was doing the interview was like, yeah, I don't know. We got 6 episodes. We'll see how it goes. When you're out flogging to the local affiliate, you're out there selling. Yeah. And then it comes full circle to years later, I'm pitching NBC and Warren Littlefield's office, and he's on the phone with Jerry, offering him like, more than $1 million an episode to say that he'll
Right.
Stay. It's the greatest journey in TV history, that show.
Incredible arc. I mean, you have to keep in mind in those early days, it was losing in the ratings to Jake and the Fat Man. That was the show that was kicking its ass at that time. Amazing. And but what was good about the show under the circumstances of failure, we were all used to failure, and we thought, well, we'll just do the show that we think is funny. And it'll get canceled. We'll make a little bit of money. We'll move on with our lives. And in a way, that was liberating. And I think that is the key to the show becoming such an original thing, was we did not really kowtow to the sitcom tastes of the time. We just did the show that we thought was funny. And that worked out, strangely.
I don't even understand how you're able to do even that. I get that it was the show was Dead Man Walking, and so fuck it, let's just go. I understand the setup of that, but yet isn't there always some phalanx of junior executives at the table read going, I don't know if that whole serial bit really works, and I don't know.
There was a lot of arguing after the table reads. Warren Littlefield often came to the meetings after the table reads. You had all the NBC executives, you had the Castle Rock executives, and there was a fight every week about the show, about putting more story in, of the moral at the end, the kind of traditional sitcom things. They wanted it to fit into that mold, and the resistance to that. And in a way, because it was doing so poorly, there was a kind of a lack of concern about it ultimately. And so they sort of let it just be what it was. And Larry eventually wisely felt like, well, if you want us to do stories that are sitcom stories, there have to be funny stories. And we started to then construct from nothing. Again, there was no Seinfeld to speak of like we look at it today in retrospect. We started to construct stories that involved all the characters and that were funny and farcical on their own and very different from what was on TV at that time. And then it got moved from Wednesday night, where it was being killed by Jake and the Fat Man, to after that must-see Thursday kind of lineup. It got moved to after Cheers, and that's when the audience really discovered it, and it kind of exploded at that point.
Can you just, because it makes me laugh again, please say Jake and the Fat Man one more time. It's the greatest title ever. Jake and the Fat Man.
Jake and the Fat Man. It was just about a fat cop, That was the hook. That was the hook. He had to run after people, and and he couldn't really catch them, and that was a drama, by the way.
You can't make it up. You truly no. So you now have your memoir coming out.
Yes. It's an epic, Rob.
Good. Glad to hear it.
It's telling the story of my career, basically, starting just before Fridays and going up to about 2022 or so. But it's also talking about comedy and my theories of comedy. And it's also talking about my personal life as well, which has been a very sort of rocky, volatile, unpredictable sort of path on its own, and how all these things dovetail and intersect. So it covers a lot of ground. It covers the culture. It covers things beyond the things that I've worked on, and the connections between those things, and my place in the world, trying to figure that out as time goes on, and have a kind of some sort of life that makes sense with some significance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait for it. Oh shit. Okay. This is what's about the show. The show rambles. It goes in different directions.
That's okay.
But I need to come back. I'm making a note. Come back to Bob Dylan co-directing. I'm coming back to that.
I directed that myself, by the way.
I just can't. Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. Bob co-wrote it, apparently.
Yes, we co-wrote it. Yes, that's true.
But your book. I want to go back to your book first, and then we're going to get back to the Bob Dylan pseudonym Renee Fontaine, maybe my favorite pseudonym ever for a celebrity. Do you have any 10 commandments about comedy, or 3 commandments, or a commandment that I can take away from this interview?
Well, one thing, and I think you've learned this yourself in your own career, is that almost anything can be comedy. The most horrible subjects can be humorous if you find the right angle. Yes. I think that there is no subject that is out of bounds. A lot of people think there are things that you just don't touch, but I'm very influenced by people like Lenny Bruce and people like that. And I believe you can take any subject, and if you find the right angle, the right hook, you'll find comedy in that. That's probably my first rule of comedy, is don't be afraid. I'm a believer in free speech, absolute free speech, and let the audience decide. Let that dynamic between the comedian or the comedy and the audience, let that be the deciding factor. Let's not censor that. And I think you need to keep breaking those boundaries and breaking those barriers in order to find the language that makes people laugh. And you see today, there's a struggle going on about what is funny, and the audience is kind of fragmented as we start to evolve this hopefully new language of comedy that will bring an audience back together again, like Blazing Saddles or Borat, which would both be very difficult movies to get made today.
You could never make the movies. There are sequences you couldn't make in both those movies. Right. There are jokes that live on today that you can't even quote in public.
Right.
I hope and suspect that there will be a movie, hopefully sooner than later, that just has an unbelievable case of the fuckets, and it will blow the doors off of everything and will be massive, and then all of a sudden it'll be safe.
Yes,
to really be funny again. But I don't know where that movie is.
You have to tap into that forbidden subject. You have to be able to go and delve into a place that seems that it's not funny. I mean, I think one of the things that characterizes my comedy is I've made comedy about things that really shouldn't be funny. And I think tapping into that forbidden quality is and liberates people. They have this need to explode. They're holding all that stuff in, and they would never laugh at it normally. But if you give them permission, you show them a way that it's okay, that laughter is the biggest laughter of all.
All right, let's talk about Bob Dylan.
You did. Speaking of comedy.
Well, he's hilarious. Everybody knows
Yes,
that.
I agree.
No one's ever made me laugh more or more consistently than Bob. Um, Tell me what the living fuck. You just got to tell me everything about this because I don't understand anything about it. Tell me what.
Well, I got a phone call from his manager saying that he had been on the road, that's what he basically does. He's on the road all the time. He's been on the road almost nonstop for decades now. And at that time, he had a VCR in his tour bus. And, he goes through movies. He loves movies. And at that time, apparently, he had gotten addicted to these Jerry Lewis movies. And he was watching the Errand Boy and Cinderella. And just thinking about Dylan watching those movies is kind
This
of
guy's
funny.
He's kind of funny.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so unbelievable.
So, and he got it in his mind. And Bob is the kind of guy, and this is something that I learned from him, or I knew already, but it was solidified by being with him, which is trust your instincts. That's all you have. Just trust your instincts. And he has trusted his instincts, and it's worked out, So he felt very strongly at that time that he wanted to do like a half-hour comedy of some sort, like a series. And at first I thought they were kidding, but he was serious. And they asked me if I'd be interested in talking to him about it. And I thought, oh, well, I'll go have a conversation with him. I mean, I've met
Wait. Hang on. Hang on. I just need to marinate, if you'll let me, for just a minute in the notion of you getting a phone call from a Hollywood manager saying, my client, Bob Dylan, would like to talk to you about his interest in doing a half-an-hour comedy.
Yes.
I please continue. I don't even know where.
Well, I had strange people. I'm sure that there are people who want to delve into it, and sometimes they think, oh, I'll do a sitcom because that's easy, and then when they find out what's really involved, they wind up dropping out. And I thought, for me, I kind of had gotten used to the surreal quality of show business, So this just seemed perfect in a way. And I thought to myself, I'll have the meeting and I could tell my friends that I met with Bob Dylan. That's what I was looking for. A good story to tell my friends. That was it. I knew it wouldn't go on beyond that first meeting. And then I went to meet him at this coffee house that he owns in Santa Monica. And at that time I was wearing pajamas, by the way. I used to wear pajamas all the time. I had really long hair, long beard, and wore pajamas. That's another subject. But and he came in, and he was also dressed like a homeless guy. And we sat in this coffee house. I don't think people even knew who he was. He had the hat pulled down over his head. And the first thing that happened was his assistant came over and said, "You guys want something to drink?" And he said, I want something hot. I want a hot beverage." Like that's what he said.
A hot beverage.
And I said, amazing. I'll have iced coffee or whatever, And they brought the drinks, and they put down the hot drink and the cold drink, and he immediately took my drink and started drinking it. This was my first encounter with him, And meanwhile, of course, I didn't touch the hot drink. And after a while, he said to me, "Well, why don't you drink your drink?" And I said, "Because you're drinking it," And he started laughing. And we loosened up. It was an icebreaker, so to speak, with the iced coffee. And we started having a kind of a loose, fun kind of conversation. And we actually started working on the project from that moment. And I would come in every day. Behind the coffee house, there was a boxing gym. He had a cubicle in the boxing gym. He would chain smoke cigarettes all day in this little closed off cubicle. And we would work 12 hours a day. He has the most incredible stamina. And we worked for 12 hours a day for months, putting together this kind of treatment for this half-hour comedy show, which was kind of more like a two-reeler, like a Buster Keaton type of two-reeler, surreal Louis Buñuel kind of comedy, as opposed to like a sitcom.
Right.
And so we did work on it. We did get it. I thought it was really good, actually, as it turned out. Whether he could do it or not, That's something we would have to find out. But I was kind of happy with the results. And we took it to HBO. And I said, if you come to the meeting at HBO, they will not have the balls to say no to you. If you come to the meeting, we will sell this project, no matter how weird it is. And he agreed. So we met in Century City at that time, and I was waiting for him in my pajamas, going to the meeting in my pajamas, and the limo pulled up, and he got out, and I was relieved because he looked stranger than I did. He was in like a black sort of villain, a cowboy villain's outfit, black hat, black leather duster, black boots, all in black, like the man in black. And we strolled into that HBO meeting, and everybody's just staring at us like, who are these two freaks? What do they want? Don't hurt us. And we got to Chris Albrecht's office, and the first thing he said to Bob was, he was so excited about meeting Bob, which is, it's exciting. And he said, oh, Bob, look on my wall. I have the original tickets for Woodstock. And Bob said, I didn't play Woodstock. And he just walked past Chris Albrecht. And Chris had this gigantic office with these big picture windows looking out over the city. And Bob just walked across the room and stared out the window for the entire meeting. He never sat down. He never acknowledged anybody. He was complete. It was like, and I had to be like Senior Wences, where I was pitching, and occasionally I go, isn't that right, Bob? And he'd go, yeah. And that was it. And we sold the show anyway. We sold the show, and then we left the meeting, got to the elevator, and I could see he had a sour expression on his face. And I was like, what's wrong? And because we were all happy, my manager, Gavin Pallone at the time, and we were all like thrilled. We couldn't believe that we had sold it. But Bob looked unhappy, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, I don't want to do it anymore. And it's like, are you kidding me, man? We just sold the show. He's like, it's too slapsticky. And we went down the elevator, just deflated because we had sold the show, and now he didn't want to do it anymore. And by the time we got to the bottom, it was over. And Gavin said to me, you got to get out of this. Just bail now, man. You better just get out of this. This is too crazy. And I said, I'm on the Bob Dylan train, and I'm going to take it to the last stop. And I went over to Bob and I said, hey, man, do you want to keep talking about this? Do you want to see if it can evolve into something else? I'm willing to keep working on it. And he agreed. And that's how it became Maston Anonymous. Another year or so of working on it.
Holy dude, I've heard a lot. Listen, I've been doing this show a long time, this little podcast. That might be one of the great show business stories. That's up there with Michael Douglas telling me that Deborah Winger bit him in the face when he was trying to cast her in terms of endearment.
Holy cow.
Yeah, holy cow. Bob Dylan, I didn't play Woodstock. Do you think that was the beginning of the end? I didn't play Woodstock?
Yeah, I think that, again, his emotions, his reasons, his logic is his own, yes. And he doesn't really worry about what people are thinking. He does his thing. If you like it, good. If you don't like it, it really doesn't matter to him. He would be, I've said this before about him and Larry David, they would be doing the same thing if they were sitting on a bus stop like homeless guys. This is what they do. They can't really make the adjustment. They're not interested in that. And this was Bob. And Bob it's worked out as it has for Larry. They do what they think is right. They do what they feel. They do what they can, really, and they can't really make the adjustment the way a lot of us can. And for them, that integrity has kind of given them a path to follow.
It's so interesting because I never would have drawn that line between those two guys, but the minute you do it, you go, of course, they're cut from the same cloth. The difference for me that I think is Dylan literally showed up on a bus and within 6 months was one of the biggest stars in the world.
Yes.
So it's easy to have the courage of your convictions when from the jump you've been hailed as the second coming. But Larry, he went through, he had to build his career. So to hold on to your convictions while people are saying no, 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 and the door slammed in your face, that's really something.
Yeah, well, that is a big difference. Larry was, in failure mode for many, many years, but he never changed his path. And that's the similarity. Bob and Larry both did their thing and had confidence on some level, or they had no choice on some level but to do what they could do. And eventually people found Larry and realized, oh my God, this guy's a genius. He's got a point of view that's completely distinctive and unique. And with Bob, it almost happened immediately. And then he had the challenge of having to sort of keep it going. So there's that intersect where they both are like, this is what I do. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's okay. Remember, despite Bob's phenomenal beginning, he had many years of failure, many years of public failure and humiliation that he just kept
post. Yes,
and
post.
he just kept moving through it, and never gave up. And he's actually probably more popular today than he's ever been.
It's unbelievable. He used to show up at my brother's soccer practices because Jacob is my brother's age, and I remember at Point Doom when it was revealed that the mysterious person buying up all of the parcels of land was Bob Dylan, and he built a house with like a gigantic golden onion on the roof,
and
a guitar pool, and it's just there's no one like him.
It's amazing how sweet and normal his kids are, Jacob and those guys are all really, really nice guys. So on some level, he was able to show that kind of love and parental sort of guidance to those kids. But it would seem like that would be a challenge for him also.
Amazing. This has been great, man. I'm super excited. Also, we didn't even talk about Dix the musical.
Right.
Tell me, before we go, just give me a little bit about directing a musical. I need to know what that discipline is like for you.
Well, that was very low budget. When they showed me the script for that, it was kind of like similar to a Borat experience. The first couple of pages of the script, I was already laughing and continued laughing through the entire script. I thought, this is, again, as we were talking about a second ago, this was a language of comedy that was kind of new to me.
Yep.
And the songs were great. And they had done this for UCB, like a 20-minute version of it, and I thought, wow, these songs are so catchy and they're hilarious and the dialogue is great. And these two guys, Josh and Aaron, they're like a gay Abbott and Costello. And I thought, wow, this is going to be, beautiful. And they gave us very little money, but they did give us some money. And so I shot it kind of in a proscenium style where they're coming right at the audience. And it was really fun. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had filmmaking. And our live audiences, when they saw the movie, also responded. We used to get waves, gales of laughter. It was really a very satisfying experience. And the movie's great. Of course, it's a very weird movie, and it didn't find a wide audience, but it's hopefully like Spinal Tap or Big Lebowski, that people will discover it over time.
If you're listening, Dix the musical. Okay, and then my last question for you is, I can't let it go without going, why pajamas? Was it a Hugh Hefner homage?
Far from it. I didn't even wear nice pajamas. I wore J.C. Penney type pajamas, like the cheapest, crappiest pajamas. But the reason I did it, I was always looking for like a uniform, something where I could get up I had enough anxiety in the morning going to work. And I wanted to wear something where I didn't have to think about it. Should I put this shirt with these pants? I didn't want to deal with that, And so I tried Dickies coveralls for a while. When I directed the Bob Dylan movie, I wore Dickies coveralls every day. But they were like heavy in the summer, that kind of thing. So
Stiff.
Yeah, right. Stiff, exactly.
Stiff.
So and pajamas are soft. They're comfortable. They match. And it was like it was one decision I didn't have to make every day, And so that's how it happened. And then when I was I reached a certain point where I was going to restaurants in the pajamas, and I was realizing, what am I doing? It's like I look like some kind of nut, I maybe I've had a nervous breakdown or something. I didn't know what was going on. And so I abandoned it. But then I wound up wearing ripped, I still do really ripped, sweatpants and t-shirts and things like that. And when I was directing Curb, I would be out at the craft services, like on Venice, we were shooting one day, and the security guy comes over and goes, "What do you think you're doing?" And I was like, I'm the director, and they go, "Yeah, you're the director." They thought I was a homeless guy, and they threw me off the set, and they had to come and rescue me. So I haven't really gotten the wardrobe thing quite down yet,
My favorite is you decided to wear pajamas the whole time, and then it took multiple years, presumably, until you were in the restaurants, and then went,
right.
What am I doing wearing pajamas every day?
Yeah, it's like I woke up suddenly, it's like I realized I'm in pajamas,
You woke, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Listen, I hope our paths cross one day. I would love to work with you.
That would be fun.
Really, really would be fun. I'm a huge fan, as you know, and this is great. You brought such a smile to my face today with these stories. They're so
Thank you,
fucking
Rob.
awesome.
Pleasure
really,
to
really
meet
great.
you, man. Really happy to meet you, and I'm sure our paths will cross.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Literally, sponsored by Lowe's.